Oh hi, welcome back to another episode of Black Dot Miniatures and Paints. Today we're going to be painting Canis Wolfborn from the Space Wolves army. He gives a lot of good rules to the Fenrisian Wolves, definitely a good cornerstone for any Fenrisian Wolf battalion you're going to be putting in your army. Let's go ahead and check him out today. Alright, we're going to be starting out with Vallejo Black Primer all over coat. With these resin models, the biggest thing is just to make sure that cleanup is your #1 priority. If you don't spend the time doing the cleanup in there, you're going to find extra little bits and bobs that are left over from the casting process that you do not want in your finished product. So just give them a couple quick look-overs and make sure that you get everything off that's not supposed to be there. To start laying down some of the Space Wolf color, we're going to come in with Nautilus Blue. I like this as a deep dark blue for the contrast, as you saw on my Space Wolf Terminator video. It does a very good job of putting some really deep blues, and we can go through and highlight those later up to give a really good contrast. Alright, now we're going to start making him look more like a Space Wolf. We're going to come in with Rust Gray. We're mostly going to focus top down on all the armor plates, on his power armor. That way we give him the deep blues in the shadows, but we also have a nice light blue, Space Wolf's blue to work from, and we're also going to highlight up from that. Alright, next we're coming in with Fenrisian Grey. We just thin this down with some airbrush flow improver, running it through. We're just trying to focus on the brightest points where highlights are going to fall to just really stand out with that contrast. We don't want to really hit any of the Nautilus Blue we previously laid down. Just focus on the Rust Gray and highlight up from there. And now we're going to go through a Mechanica standard Gray. This is going to be the color for the base of the wolf. We're going to change it up, add some variety and definition to it later on, but this is what's going to at least get us a good base coat. With how deep the pores are in this resin model, just know it's going to take forever. Unfortunately, I even tried to switch to a bigger brush here to make it go a little bit quicker, and it's just a pain in the butt. So just take your time. Don't get anything on your previous blues, but get them layered up. Next we're going to come through with Vallejo Metal Color Steel. This is to give us a good steel base coat to lay down and then highlight up from eventually. Just pick out his claws, his vents on his power pack, any other little metal bits you see around the model. There's not too many of this steel color, but just make sure you give them the attention they deserve. Alright, now we're going to be using a homemade Nuln oil wash. I actually learned about this through Luke's APS. He does very good stuff on giving you how-to videos on making things for the hobby that are going to save you some money in the long run. So definitely check him out. I'll link to his video in the description. This little pot I made, I did it maybe half full, cost me about 30 cents to make, and we all know how much a pot of Nuln oil costs, so something you can do that's going to give you an equal result with far less money spent into it. We're just going to give an all-over coat of this homemade wash to the wolf and any of the metal bits that we laid down with silver a while ago. Alright, now we're coming through with GW Corn Red to give us a good foundation red for the cloaks and cloths throughout this model. I'm more of a fan of doing it this way. You can use a Caribou Crimson wash if you want to, but if you start out with this dark tone, highlight up from there, I feel like it gives you a better result all in all. The only thing you need to be mindful of is just thinning your paints, that way your transitions are not as hard and visible. Alright, now we're mixing up Corn Red and Mephiston Red 1-to-1. We're going to pick out a larger area for the highlights than we normally would, just because it is mixed. It is a little bit easier to lay those highlights in without seeing the transition lines. Again, we're working super thin. So we're just laying that down, picking up some of the highest points on the model, and we're going to go through and reinforce those later. Alright, now we're moving to Mephiston Red by itself. Again, same concept, we're just picking out the highlights, the highest points where light's going to fall and hit, being a little bit more selective of where we put it down than the previous layer. The first layer we maybe did 60%, now we're doing maybe 30%, 25%, and we're just going to continue to get finer and finer with our highlights to enforce where we want to go in the long run. Alright, the cornerstone of the Space Wolf's army, gold. So there's a ton of gold all over this model. Just take your time. We're using Retributer Armor. This is one of my favorite golds to try and lay down for a red gold on anything without it being super thin, take forever. So just go through, pick out every bit on there. If you think it's going to be gold, probably going to be gold. It's Space Wolves. Alright, now we're doing a dry brush layer of Abbadon Black. We're going to add some variety to the fur. We could have also gone through with our Mechanicus Standard Gray and started there, but I like the result. The wash mostly was sitting in the recesses, not too much on the outside on the tops. So we're just going to add a little bit black to it, and then later on we'll change it from there and add some more to it. So now we're moving to GW Dawnstone, dry brushing this on. I really didn't like the result we ended up with. We decided later on to change it to a gray wolf with brown tips. It's not a big deal, it's just paint. If you decide you don't like something, don't keep trying to force it. Change it if you want to. It's not a big deal, it is just paint. Alright, we kept trying to fix our mistakes, kept trying to make it work here. It didn't. This is Praxeti White. It's a dry brush from GW. Again, we tried it. We really wanted it to succeed. I wanted that gray to white wolf, and I didn't like it. No big deal. We just switched it to brown later on. Ended up loving that result anyhow, so we got where we needed to get. Remember, this is low stress. This is what we do for fun. This isn't anything that is just stressing us out of our mind. If it is, you're doing it wrong. So now coming in with Xandri Dust, I did this wrong too. Like, just keep in mind, I'm not perfect. I am just a hobbyist, as all of you are. I decided I was going to do this Xandri Dust all over his teeth, all over his claws. The claws, no big deal. The bones, no big deal. Nothing crazy there. But if you look, I didn't do the Screamer Pink in his mouth. So whenever you're trying to force your paintbrush through to do Screamer Pink over Xandri Dust, it doesn't work too well. So we had to come back in and clean that up. Not a big deal whatsoever. Alright, here we come with that Screamer Pink. We pick out his tongue, pick out his teeth. We try and be careful, but at the same time we know we can just come back through with the Xandri Dust and reinforce it. This is the only pink on him, so just lay that in. You can come back later and highlight it with Pink Horror. I didn't. It's not a big deal. XB88 is what we got on deck next. This is one of my favorite just multi-purpose browns. It's great for leathers, it's great for furs, it's great for really anything you want it to be used on. Don't sleep on this color. If you've been thinking about get it, certainly get it. It's going to add to your arsenal of paints and really help out. Alright, here we come with Cadian Fleshtone. I'm not a big fan of doing Bugman's Glow and then switching to Cadian and X, Y, and Z. No, we can just skip the Bugman's Glow altogether, lay down Cadian Fleshtone, wash it, and then reinforce it later. So, we're just getting his face on this one. That's the only Cadian Fleshtone we have on this model. And now we're going to do an all-over wash with Agrax on the cloak, on the XV88 we laid down. We're also going to do the Xandria dust on his hair, and then on the bones throughout the model. Alright, here we come with Reikland Fleshshade. We're going to hit all the golds on him just to add some definition, some contrast in the recesses for the golds. We're also going to hit his face while we're at it. Just take your time going through, because again, it's Space Wolves, they've got gold everywhere, so you want to make sure you get it in one pass. Alright, now we're mixing up Vallejo Metacolor Silver and Steel. You definitely want to mix these two. If you try and go straight to the silver, it's way too abrupt of a highlight, and you can see the paint transition from outer space. So to try and keep our transitions down, we're just going to mix them 1 to 1, work about 60% of the coverage we did before, and go from there. And now we're on to Xandria dust again. We're just highlighting up from the Agrax that we laid down previously, picking out the tops of the bones, hard edges, stuff like that we feel as though needs to be taken up to the next step. Alright, here we come with Mephiston Red and Evil Sun Scarlet 1 to 1. We're just continuing our transition on the highlights. I thought we were going to be good with pure Mephiston, but I said, well, let's take it to the next step. Let's take it a bit higher. So, just go through and add that to the tips to about maybe 15%, 20% of what's left to be highlighted. Alright, now we're coming through with Xandria and Ushabti 1 to 1. Again, picking out a smaller surface area that we had previously highlighted with just the Xandria, taking it up another notch. We're going to come in eventually with full Ushabti bone, work in all those highlights to make them stand out and look their best. Alright, now we're back to the Cadian Fleshtone. So after the Reikland Fleshshade, it washed it down, made it a little bit dark. We want to pick that back up, highlight that back up, and continue the transition on his face. Focus on the cheeks, the tip of his nose, the lip between his beard and his hair. And now we're on to Kislev Flesh. Same exact concept here, we're just focusing on a smaller area to try and make those highlights stand out the best they can. Alright, next we're on to Runefang Steel by itself. We could have continued with the Vallejo Metacolor Silver, but we opted against it. We are going through and just picking out the base coat for the gems that we're going to do with Spirit Stone later. And then I also decided to do like a wet, streaky dry brush effect over the claws. Love the way it turned out. It's not for everybody, but it worked for me in this situation. Alright, now we're coming through with the dry brush coat of XV88. We're just hitting the cloak. You'll see here in a minute that I went a little bit crazy with it and got some on the actual red parts of the cloak. No big deal. If you get to it quick enough, you can go ahead and just wash it right off with some water and a clean brush. Alright, now we come through with the dry brush coat of Mournfang Brown. We're going to hit the top of the wolf, top of the tail, his chest, back of the arms, and some of the areas around his paws. Like I said a while ago, this is where we decided to switch it up from the gray wolf with the white tips to the gray wolf with the brown tips. Don't be afraid to change what you're doing. It's not a big deal. It's just paint. Alright, now we're coming through with an Agrax Earthshade. We're just trying to put some of the brown tones back into the recesses where we decided to switch this up to. Sometimes when you're dry brushing, it gets a little wild, gets down in the recesses. We can go through and fix that individually, but a good cheater step is just to go through, hit it with some brown shade, and you can work up from there. So this next color is Balor Brown. I've never actually used this. This is the first time, and I've had it for, I don't know, 3 years. It's a good step up from Mournfang. Definitely check this out. This is another good one to add to your arsenal. here I'm just doing some edge highlighting with that Balor Brown again. We want to just reinforce some of the heart lines around his muzzle, around his eyes, also highlight on his feet where we don't want to go crazy and get too much on the paws. Next I came through with Screaming Skull. I guess I decided to skip the pure Ushabti bone. We just went straight in with Screaming Skull. Did kind of a wet dry brush over his hair. We also hit some of the high points on those bones. And now Liberator Gold to go through and highlight some of the golds up from. Alright, and finally we're coming through with Fenrisian Grey. This is just to pick out some of the hardest points in the armor, some of the gouges on that front plate, and then some of the edge highlights throughout it. You don't need to do too much of this because the airbrush laid in a ton of this work before, but if you happen to see a couple that you feel as though will make it stand out a little bit more, get after it. Alright guys, so that's how I painted up this Canis Wolfborn. I love him. I think he looks great. I know that I say that with every model, but I've got a little bit of a bias. Hopefully you can learn something from this video. If you can, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, share if you want to. Definitely will help grow this channel so I can show more people different tips and tricks for this hobby. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.